In 1849, a struggling inventor named Walter Hunt sat alone in his New York workshop with a single piece of wire in his hands. He owed a man named J.R. Chapin exactly $15, a debt that today would be worth around $500. Chapin was tired of waiting and wanted his money. Hunt did not have it, so he did what he always did when he needed cash fast. He started inventing. He twisted the wire, bent it, coiled it, twisted it again. Somewhere in those few hours, an idea clicked into place that would end up in nearly every household, hospital, and sewing kit on the planet for the next 175 years. He had just invented the modern safety pin. He sold the rights to it almost immediately for $400. He never made another cent from it, and the object he tossed away for pocket change would go on to become one of the most reproduced pieces of metal in human history. Walter Hunt was born in 1796 in a small town in upstate New York, and by the time he reached adulthood, it was clear he had an unusual gift. He could look at almost any everyday problem and solve it with a machine. Over his lifetime, Hunt patented a repeating rifle, a fountain pen, a knife sharpener, a flax spinner, an ice plow, and even one of the first working sewing machines in American history, built more than a decade before Elias Howe, the man usually credited with the invention, ever filed a patent. But Hunt's own daughter convinced him not to sell it. She warned him it would put seamstresses out of work and destroy their livelihoods. Hunt listened to her and walked away from what could have been a fortune. This pattern repeated throughout his life. Hunt was brilliant at invention and terrible at business. He built things the world needed and then let other men get rich off them. The safety pin would become the most painful example of all. Here is the part most people never learn. Walter Hunt did not invent the concept of a spring-locked pin. He perfected it. The idea itself is almost 3,000 years old. Archaeologists have found bronze fasteners called fibulae in graves and ruins across ancient Greece, Rome, and Central Europe, some dating back to around 1300 BC. A fibula worked almost exactly like a modern safety pin, with a coiled spring holding tension at one end and a sharp pin locking into a small catch at the other. Roman soldiers used them to fasten their military cloaks. Wealthy citizens wore ornate gold and silver versions as jewelry, proudly displayed on the shoulder for everyone to see. But as clothing styles changed and buttons became common, the fibula faded out of everyday use. The idea did not disappear. It just went dormant for more than 1,000 years, waiting for someone to rediscover it out of pure financial desperation in a cramped New York workshop. What made Hunt's version different was not the spring. Ancient blacksmiths already understood spring tension. What made Hunt's version different was the clasp. He added a small curved guard at the tip of the pin that fully covered the sharp point after it was fastened. That single addition meant the pin could no longer stab the person wearing it, snag on fabric, or fall open unexpectedly. It was a small mechanical tweak, but it solved the exact problem that had made straight pins genuinely dangerous for thousands of years. According to accounts from Hunt's own lifetime, he sketched the design and built a working prototype in a single evening, working feverishly by candlelight with nothing more than a length of spring wire and a set of basic tools. On April 10, 1849, he filed for a patent. The United States Patent Office stamped it as patent number 6281. It was official. Walter Hunt now legally owned one of the simplest and most useful inventions in American history, and within weeks he would give it away. Hunt did not seem to grasp what he was holding. To him, the safety pin was just another quick fix for an immediate problem, the same way he had solved a dozen smaller problems throughout his career. He sold the full patent rights to a company that would later become W.R. Grace and Company for $400. After paying off Chapin's $15 debt, Hunt walked away with roughly $385 in his pocket, and that was the entire financial reward he would ever receive for one of the most widely manufactured objects in modern history. There would be no royalties, no licensing fees, no percentage of future sales. The company that bought the rights would go on to profit for decades as the safety pin exploded in popularity. Hunt, meanwhile, went right back to inventing other things, mostly to pay off other debts. It is almost impossible to calculate how much money slipped through his fingers, but by some modern estimates, the safety pin alone has generated many millions of dollars in sales since 1849. Walter Hunt saw none of it. Once the patent changed hands, the safety pin spread with astonishing speed. Manufacturers realized this was a perfect product for the industrial age. It needed one material, spring steel wire, and one simple process that could be mechanized and scaled almost infinitely. By the late 1870s, other inventors had refined the clasp further, adding stronger guards that locked more securely, and factories across the United States began stamping out safety pins by the millions. By 1914, just 65 years after Hunt's original patent, American factories alone were producing more than 1.3 billion safety pins every single year, at a cost of less than 1 cent per pin. A device that had once existed only as hand-forged bronze jewelry for Roman aristocrats had become one of the cheapest, most disposable objects on Earth. For most of the next century, the safety pin quietly did its job. It held hems together, it repaired broken straps, and for generations of parents, it was the only thing standing between a cloth diaper and disaster, long before adhesive tabs and disposable diapers existed. But in the 1970s, the safety pin took on a completely different identity. British punk bands, most famously the Sex Pistols, began wearing oversized safety pins through torn clothing, through ears, and even through cheeks, turning a humble household object into a symbol of rebellion against everything polished and mainstream. Fans copied the look, and almost overnight, the safety pin became visual shorthand for punk culture worldwide. Decades later, in 2016, the safety pin took on yet another meaning. Following a rise in reported hate incidents after the Brexit vote in the United Kingdom and the US presidential election, that same year, people on both sides of the Atlantic began pinning small safety pins to their jackets as a quiet signal of solidarity with immigrants and minority groups. A $400 patent sale from 1849 had somehow become a political statement 167 years later. Perhaps the strangest part of this entire story is how little the safety pin has changed. Look at one in your kitchen drawer right now, and you are looking at essentially the same coiled spring, the same clasp, and the same guard that Walter Hunt sketched out in a few desperate hours in 1849. Engineers have tried plastic versions, coil-less versions, curved versions for quilters, and decorative versions covered in beads and charms. But the core mechanism has never needed to be reinvented, because Hunt, whether he realized it or not, had already solved the problem completely. Today, safety pins hold together everything from Olympic race numbers to emergency bandages to high-fashion designer dresses. In 1994, Versace built an entire iconic evening gown held together with oversized gold safety pins, turning Hunt's cheap fix into a piece of couture history worn on international runways. Walter Hunt died in 1859, just 10 years after he patented the safety pin, largely unrecognized and never wealthy. He spent his final decade doing exactly what he had always done, inventing new devices to solve new problems, one after another, never holding on to the rights long enough to see the real payoff. The $15 debt that started it all would be forgotten by history if it had not accidentally produced one of the most perfect, most permanent designs in the story of human invention. A 3,000-year-old idea, buried and forgotten for centuries, brought back to life in a single desperate evening by a man who just wanted to pay a friend back. Not bad for a coil of scrap wire that nobody thought was worth more than $400. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments what everyday object you want us to uncover the hidden history of next. And make sure to like this video so more people can find it.